Okay, good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. We are very grateful for all of you who are joining us live this afternoon, and anybody who watches this at a later time. Thank you for choosing to spend some of your precious time with the Google for Education team this afternoon. Today, we are going to be talking about Chromebooks in every class, and the idea of this afternoon's session is really to capture and share I guess some of the versatility that we see stories emerging from schools all the time around the way that they're using Chromebooks for learning that's really has great impact, for, right from the littlest kids all the way through to senior years. And we're going to share some of that, as I said, this afternoon. Please do use the chat at any point. Ask any question at all. It doesn't have to be relevant to what we're talking about at that point in time. So that's the great thing about the chat. We can just come back to it when it is appropriate to do so. Before we jump in, though, I did want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land. So I am in Melbourne, Australia. So the traditional people here are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. But I know that people are joining from all across Australia. I had a great conversation with someone from South Australia before everyone else joined. I know we've got someone from the Middle East on the call this afternoon. So obviously everywhere that you are, you will have traditional people of those lands. And we just wanted to take that moment to recognise them, pay our respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging, and also just extend once again that respect to all of you. As an ex-teacher, I honestly believe that teachers are the hardest working people in the world, and so anybody in education, you spending time to I guess learn is such a testament to wanting to be the best that you possibly can be as well. All right, next slide. Thanks, Rich. Okay, so this afternoon, I do have three of my wonderful colleagues joining us. So my name is Kimberly. I don't think I actually said that. Hello, I'm Kimberly. And I work in the Google for Education team based out of Melbourne. And I oversee Victoria, South Australia and Tasmania, so the southern half of the state, kind of. And then this afternoon, we also have my counterpart from New South Wales, Brent Sava, who oversees sort of northwest-ish. So New South Wales, the ACT, WA. Jumping up, we have Chris Betcher, who's also in Sydney. He oversees adoption, which is basically use of the products across Australia and New Zealand, does a little bit of APAC stuff as well. And then Richard Johnson, who is our education solution engineer. You're just a singular solution engineer, not plural solutions, Rich? I thought there would have been more than one solution.
Yeah. You can only pick one thing at a time. Yeah, one solution at a time.
Okay, one solution at a time. So Rich is, I always just refer to him as like the technical guru for everything Google for Education, basically for anywhere through Asia Pacific. There's basically nothing technical that Rich doesn't know. And Rich, that's a challenge for someone to try and stump you now. So feel free to do that, everybody. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so this afternoon, as I said, we're going to be chatting about Chromebooks across different classes and the curriculum. So we're going to start by talking a little bit about productivity. I'm going to throw to Brent for that in a minute. Talk a little bit about accessibility, creativity, assessment, and then I guess woven throughout that as well, we're also going to talk about some stuff that you can do using the Chrome Education Upgrade, which is the management license for a Chromebook, to deploy things really easily, to manage things really easily, to make your life much simpler, because ultimately what we're trying to help people do in education is focus on the learning of education, not the technical side of education. So we're going to talk about some of the technical stuff that helps us to do that. And we do have a special guest from one of our wonderful schools in Melbourne who's going to share some stories about the way that they use Chromebooks. And anyone who is in Australia would definitely know that Melbourne's teachers have probably had to use technology more than most this year, being in lockdown for approximately the entire year. We are very grateful for Sonia for giving up her time this afternoon as well. Okay, Brent, I'm going to hand over to you.
Awesome. And because I'm going to actually do a couple of live demos per your suggestion yesterday, Kimberly, I am going to steal from you, Rich, if that's okay, and present.
You've got present control on the slide deck.
Awesome. But since I'm going to actually need to go out on the internet, I'm just going to, let's snag real fast. Cool. So here we are. So I've got the chat open. And I just love, like, on a scale from 1 to 10, like 1 being brand new to Chromebooks, don't know anything about them, 10 being like total super rock star, know everything probably better than I do and maybe everyone else from Google on the team, just pop in the chat maybe where you stand. Just love to kind of have an understanding, especially for the rest of the presenters. So yeah, 1, new to Chromebooks, 10, feeling like I know everything. Kimberly, I'd probably be like a 4.
I'm thinking that if we're comparing ourselves to, like, you know, it depends. Like, I know a lot about the teaching and learning side, but if I've got a Rich on the call and I have to, like, my knowledge of anything technical is going to pale in comparison. So
cool. So it seems like we're leaning a little bit towards the higher end of the spectrum. And so I don't want to, at least for my section, as we were talking about how we were going to want to present and keeping content fresh and helpful. Those of you on the call will probably attest that, you know, you can be pretty productive on a Chromebook. Like, that's the baseline of what Chromebooks are great for. I can open it up, it just works. Many of you that are typing in 6, 7, 8, you've probably seen this slide before. But for those of you who are brand new, this is what took us from selling 25,000 of them in the United States in 2012 to over 9 million, outselling our competition, both of them combined, you know, 2 or 3 years ago. The simplicity, right? Chromebooks just work. It's really hard as a quote unquote salesperson to, you know, say, what's the big deal with Chromebooks? And it's like, actually, they just work. Like, that should be the tagline printed on the front. And those of you who manage them probably know. Now, that's the baseline. Obviously, they've evolved a lot since Samsung created the first Chromebook years ago. And, you know, I'll mention and show a couple things today in terms of Android applications and working offline. I'll never forget years ago when one of our competitors liked to claim that Chromebooks were nothing but a paperweight. That is definitely as far from the truth as it could possibly be. And we're excited to continue to evolve them. But again, for those of you who are brand new to it, boots up, lightweight, durable, affordable. That's the baseline. And that's what, from a productivity perspective, you can be productive quickly and easily. And that's what teachers love about Chromebooks. Now, what I actually did want to do really quickly is, and I was going to try to find, I'd searched everywhere in our magical Google Drive for the beautiful slide that shows the latest and greatest Chromebooks. And then I thought, you know what? Let's just actually, a lot of times folks across Australia and New Zealand will call us and say, you know, what can I get? And what you can get in the US sometimes looks different than it looks in Japan or here in Australia. So one of our many partners is LWT. And I just go to their website because they often have a lot of stock options for Chromebooks. So you can buy Chromebooks from lots of different folks. But I do want to just kind of quickly point out, when we talk about productivity means different things for different people. A third grader who's just needing to be able to, you know, type up some Word documents, access Google Classroom, be able to surf the web a bit. They you know, what we would consider a base Chromebook would be good for them. And when you want to start to see what those look like in terms of specs and pricing, LWT's website has a really good option for looking and seeing what that might be. But on the other end of the spectrum, everyone on this call, from a Google perspective, their primary, actually the only device that we give EDU Googlers anymore are Chromebooks. I haven't touched a Windows or a Mac device in, I think, 4 or 5 years. But you can see here, Asus, Dell, HP, all of the OEMs that make Chromebooks also make advanced Chromebooks as well. So I could not do the work that I do because I'm the type of person that has hundreds of thousands of tabs and windows open at the same time. Versus some of you who might be doing graphic editing or video editing and things of that nature. Obviously, you might want something that's on the higher end of the spectrum with a, you know, i3, i5, i7 processor. So I don't want to belabor hardware too much because that's not what we're here to discuss today. But when we talk about productivity on Chromebooks, we now have a variety of options for you. So that's certainly something to keep in mind. For those of you that might be brand new to Google on the call, I just want to make mention that, you know, our ecosystem of products, G Suite for Education, Classroom, this is kind of our core hub of what we have to offer here. And I just want to jump straight into G Suite, and I certainly don't want to read a slide to you, but you can see, you know, lots of usage worldwide. But G Suite for Education, free for educational institutions. We do have a paid version now, but you know, if you're a school that's using G Suite for Education and have been for a while, Chromebooks we often find just are the next logical step. When you fully moved into the web and you're working in the web and collaborating in the web, Chromebooks are a great option, especially when you're using G Suite. Now, I will show a couple options later because I know that there are probably folks on the call who are working in a you know, two platform ecosystem, and that's totally okay. You can say, say Office to a Googler and our heads won't spin off. You could even say Keynote or Pages to a Googler and our heads won't spin off. But we generally find that, a lot of schools are operating exclusively a G Suite ecosystem, perhaps a bit of G Suite and a bit of Office, or even if you're using predominantly Office, you can still utilize Chromebooks. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. We do very proud of Classroom, and it launched almost 6 years ago now, which is hard to believe, but we do like to pause, and G Suite is where everything sits, all of our version of docs and sheets and slides, but Classroom is what brings it all together really beautifully. And I think when you walk into a class and you see a teacher that has one-to-one device option, even shared device options, but then the software that sits on top of it to make their lives even easier and to push out content. Classroom is the hub for that, and obviously works really well on a Chromebook. Do you want to quickly pause and talk about productivity, given that we're talking about productivity, make mention for those of you who might not use Meet or are interested in the new Meet features. So it continues to evolve. Obviously, what we're using today is Google Meet. I was impressed. One of the most recent features that we've launched is background noise filtering, and there's some major construction going on outside of this window behind me that's partially blurred because of new Meet features as well. But again, given the world that we live in currently, Meet continues to evolve, and certainly, if we get to a place where we need to be learning and working from home again in the future, or more so than we are now, Meet is a good option for getting your classes together and your staff on the same page. And last but not least, Forms, another quick thing we love to call out in education because of, although it's not technically a G Suite primary product, G Suite for Education primary product, there's certainly a lot of features that have been built into it in terms of quizzing and automated responses and things of that nature. And I know Kimberly will speak later about in the assessment piece, or whoever is presenting on assessment, I think it's Kimberly, we'll talk about lockdown quizzes and forms that are available. So one other thing that I did want to point out while I've got you, just a few things that we often, how do I phrase this? The naysayers about the Google ecosystem, again, the past, it's been called a paperweight or things of that nature. I just want to quickly remind you that if you do not have access to Wi-Fi, Chromebooks can still be a really strong option for you. And that's one of the things that a lot of folks don't realize. So I'm logged into a Google Drive instance right now. And you can see I've got all my files here. A lot of what people don't realize is if you go to docs.google.com or even slides.google.com, I can actually come over here to, oops, need to change my accounts. Well, that's all right. You can see I've got all my different accounts logged in here. I can actually make things available offline, file by file. And as you can see here, once I've received the check, that actually shows that that file is saved offline. So they're offline file options, which is pretty cool. The other thing that I wanted to make mention of as well is if I go back to my drive, you can see this file here, Who is Cosmo, is actually a Word document. So a number of years ago, Google made it possible for you to open files within Drive. And now I can actually natively open a Microsoft Word or PowerPoint file and edit it natively within Google Drive. So when we talk about that kind of entirely Microsoft ecosystem, or that ecosystem where you might be doing a bit of both, we try to make using our tools, we are an open ecosystem, we try to make using our tools as easy as possible. Now, I know some of you out there, I'll never forget the teacher that I worked with in WAGA one time who was like, but I want to be able to, in a PowerPoint, just like in a PowerPoint presentation, I want to be able to, granularly clip art around a specific image. That requires a local version of Microsoft Office. So when you're working predominantly in the web, there will be features that might only be available in local versions of things. So I do just want to make mention, obviously, we try to be as open ecosystem as possible, but there might be certain features that you're used to using in a Microsoft ecosystem that are only available in a local version. Generally 365 and G Suite for Education are pretty tit for tat, but you can obviously convert those files back into a Google file, and things are always going to generally work foolproof in the Google ecosystem, but you certainly have that option to work back and forth between the two. And the last thing that I want to mention as well is, beyond just, I wanted to point out that if you are in an environment where you're using Windows, we do have applications. And so just like I can download these various Microsoft apps, or if I wanted to download the Wii Video app, for example, going back to that offline editing mode, I can download these, and you can see I've got this installed on my device. We announced a couple of years ago that you can install Android apps and run those offline on Chromebooks as well. And you can see that's done here through the Play Store. So I said I wasn't going to talk at length about productivity, but I think I just did. But yeah, hopefully that gives you a quick overview of how easy it is to be productive on a Chromebook, regardless of what your ecosystem might look like from a software point of view. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kimberly.
Awesome. Thanks, Brent. And I think there was a question that we'll address in just a second, but I think actually, jumping to the Google Play Store is such an interesting thing, because I think I'd probably have a conversation fortnightly with a user who doesn't realize that Google Play is actually available on Chromebooks. And I think it's, it is a newer addition to the Chromebook ecosystem. But it does mean that there is very little in terms of that app ecosystem that exists out there on whatever device you're using that you cannot get on a Chromebook. And, we were excited earlier this year to have actually announced only a couple of months ago that you can get Minecraft EDU on Chromebooks finally. And that's a really big deal. It means that, basically if you could have done it on an existing tablet device, you can probably access it through the Google Play Store as well. And if you want any more info on that, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Rich is our expert on all things, everything actually. Rich, you're now officially just the expert, full stop. So Brent, when you were showing LWT's website before with the Chromebooks that they had in stock, there was a question in the chat around whether they were the education prices. Do you know off the top of your head if you were on the education filter within there, or potentially not, and you guys should check it out yourselves or contact your preferred partner?
Yeah, great question. I apologize. I probably should have had a quick look and have sorted. I believe I just went straight to their Chromebook page, and if it was the price tag that was throwing you off a bit, you can certainly sort by price and you'd see, some more affordable options. LWT is, just like many of our partners, sells everything. Enterprise Chromebooks, which are, for example, here's the enterprise Chromebook that I'm using right here, which would spec out price-wise about like that Asus device we were looking at. But to your point, Kimberly, it's best that you would work with, either one of your existing partners to ask for the best pricing, or if you have questions about other partners that you could potentially work with. The great thing about being an open ecosystem is it's a competitive landscape, and you can certainly ask around and get the best price that works for you. So it was to formally answer your question, that would have been a mix of pricing in there, I'd imagine, all the way from enterprise level pricing to some of those would have been education prices.
Awesome. Thank you. And yeah, we at Google don't actually sell the devices direct, with the exception of the Pixelbook Go, which do we actually sell it directly in Australia? I don't think we do either, do we? We make it.
Only through, yeah.
No, I don't think we do. I think we only sell it through our 3 partners that sell it. I'm actually on a Pixelbook Go right now. It's really cool, by the way. I was at the start like, oh, is it that cool? And now I'm like, no, it's seriously cool. But you can't see it because I'm using it, so I can't. Oh, there you go. Chris has got one right there. All right. Anyway, we are going to jump now. Please do chuck any other questions in the chat. I know there was a question about the specs for Minecraft EDU. Lee, Chris put that link in there. If you have any other specific follow-up, just jump them in the chat. Whether it's relevant to what we're talking about or not, the chat is an open forum for anything you guys would like to know about. So we are going to just quickly address about the concept of accessibility on Chromebooks. And I think this is such an important thing to make sure that we do raise and bring to the forefront. I feel like we've had this real shift in education over the past 5 years where accessibility and thinking about ensuring that everything we do is inclusive for all of our learners used to sort of be, oh, well, that's the responsibility of, the special ed teacher or that specific intervention aid or something like that. And I know in Victoria, we actually built that in as one of the only compulsory things that Victorian teachers had to do to retain their teacher registration was actually do professional development around students with additional needs. And at Google, we really believe that it's such an important thing, and it's built into the way that we design everything. It's in all our products, in all of our hardware. It's so important to us that people are actually able to access what they need to access, because as you can see on this slide, we really believe that everyone should have access to the quality education that they deserve. So I'm just going to talk briefly about this. If you want any more info about anything specific to do with accessibility, we do have our email addresses on the final slide. Please honestly feel free to send me an email. I'm very happy to jump in and chat about anything specifically with people as well after this afternoon. So one of the really cool things about Chromebooks is that accessibility comes built in, so it's in the box. There are some really fantastic features that I actually use every single day. As Brent said, we all use Chromebooks as our primary device every single day, and they just make the way that I'm able to engage online so much easier for me. And I know that they make such a huge impact. They can literally have the ability to change one student's entire experience of learning. So you can see there's a whole lot of stuff that's listed across this page, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but a couple of things that have been big wins in a really simple way are things like our visual support. So the ability to do things like really quickly and easily zoom to magnify, which I won't be able to do right now because Rich is actually presenting, zoom in to magnify. This is a huge one. We have a couple of different versions of that magnification. And just being able to, not make a big deal out of what it is that I'm struggling to read on the page and just jump in and get that in, I guess in a larger size can be completely game changer for many of our learners, including for me. I genuinely use it every single day. Couple of other things that are built in that I love. We have screen reading built in. So the select to speech function that's built into Chromebooks is super easy to use. It's literally a matter of turning it on, which Rich is going to show you how you can push some of this stuff out through the admin console as well. Turning it on, selecting your speech, hitting a keyboard shortcut, and it will read anything from anywhere you are on your Chromebook. And that concept of being able to access content through multiple mediums is such a powerful thing. Just finally, I will flag before I hand over to Rich to talk a little bit about this, we also have this amazing ecosystem of partners who develop really cool stuff that works well with our tools. And if you go to the Chrome Web Store and you can actually search specifically for Chrome extensions to do with accessibility, I could spend 3 hours talking about 2 of these because I love some of these so much. But basically what we're sort of really trying to highlight is that if there are specific needs that you are trying to address with your learners, there is probably a way of ensuring that the device that they're working on, if it is a Chromebook, will actually be able to assist them to be included in the maximum amount of learning opportunities that they have. So feel free, once again, as I said, I know that I've gone through this very quickly. I am going to pass to Rich to talk about how you can actually control some of this using the Chrome Education upgrade. But if there are specific questions that you have around accessibility, it is a really genuine offer. I think it's such an important thing to talk about and help people with, because kids would rather miss out than stand out in class. So use my email, feel free to ping me with questions afterwards. And Rich, I'm going to hand to you, because one of the cool things about managing Chromebooks is that you can actually make sure that this is really easy for everyone to access.
Absolutely. So one of the key things that we talk about at Google is obviously accessibilities, which Kimberly's just mentioned. But as an administrator, how do you help your students? How do you help your teachers that need these accessibility features from the get-go? So part of the admin console today is that you can add those features in. Sorry, I'm just going to take presentation control. So these features can be pushed down to the device from the actual sign-in screen, and also to a user's profile. So what that means is if there is someone that is using a cart of devices and needs accessibility features, doesn't matter which device they jump to, those features are going to be turned on for them and follow them around to the different devices. If they're using one-to-one devices, it's going to stay switched on from the sign-in screen and into their profile as well. 2 other cool features that we also introduce is Autocomplete Sign-In. So rather than a student having to type in their full username at a certain school.com.au or .edu.au, this feature will auto-complete the last bit of their username. So all they're typing in is their first name or their last name or a combination of both. We take it one step further and we actually enable PIN number login. So you can have a 6-digit PIN login for those students that find it hard to type in their username as well. And we see this is pretty common across kindergarten to up to year 2 students who find it hard to type. So I'm going to quickly jump into the admin console and show you where you can find those features. And we'll see if it keeps me logged in. There we go. So we go into our device settings. It's very easy. We've just updated the admin console, so it may look a little bit different to what you're used to. And I'm going to go into settings, and I'm going to go into devices. And you'll see here, there's a whole heap of devices. The first one here, sign-in restriction. So allow any user to sign in, but also the autocomplete domain. So here I've populated it with the end part of my domain. This might be education.newsouthwales.gov.au or from whatever state you're from, and you can push that out to every single device. Now, if we scroll down, you can turn on accessibility features, but you can also, there's a whole heap of them to enable. So you can see here, sign-in screen accessibility. So this is if a student or a teacher needs them right at the sign-in screen to help them sign in or use guest mode or use kiosk mode, these are the features you want to enable. Now, these sort of features are also, as I said, available on the user and browser setting as well. So it means it follows the user profile regardless of what device they're using in the classroom. And now I'm going to jump across and I'm just going to quickly scroll down to where we can allow PIN login. So you'll see under the security section, you'll see a quick unlock. So you can use PIN. And some of our new devices that are coming out today enable fingerprint login as well, which will make it even easier. So that's a quick rundown of what's available for an administrator to help with accessibility.
That's awesome. Thanks, Rich. And I think it's really great. Like even something like the PIN number, I don't know about everybody else on the call, but like I know that on my internet banking, like they give you the option of having a proper password, and you're like, no one wants to remember 27 digits and numbers and things. And it's like, can I put in a 4-digit PIN? Done. So like I think there's, that concept of it being solely for juniors, but it is also for, a lot of our learners of all different ages will not necessarily be able to recall quickly, complex passwords and things like that. And so actually just making sure that they're not left behind. So they're not actually, 30 seconds after everyone else to log in, which makes a big difference in a classroom when you are, as a student trying to keep up constantly with your peers as well. So, okay, we're going to take a little bit of a change of tune, and we got a little bit of a, Sonia, you got this flashed on the screen, so you knew you were coming next. But we are very grateful to welcome our guest this afternoon, which is Sonia Mazzy, who Sonia just told me what her title was, and I told her I'd forget instantly. Something to do with being awesome and leading innovation at St Thomas More in Hadfield, which is one of Google's reference schools here in Victoria in the northern part of Melbourne. The school actually uses Chromebooks pretty extensively, almost across the board. And as I mentioned, if you have been tracking what's happening in Victoria, hasn't been the best year down here. And so St Thomas More definitely has had quite the journey this year. And anything that they didn't think they were able to do online at the start of the year, they had to learn how to do this year, to do remote teaching all year. And so we thought we'd just welcome Sonia along this afternoon just to talk a little bit about how Chromebooks are being used across different year levels. And Sonia, we spoke before, but if you want to just start with just a little bit of an overview of the way you guys are using Chromebooks, and then if there's any specific questions, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as well as we're talking, and we'll ask Sonia some questions. So Sonia, I'm going to throw to you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for that beautiful intro.
You can tell your principal that's your new title.
I love my new title.
I'm in charge of awesome stuff.
Yeah. It's great. Look, basically, we are a one-to-one Chromebook school. Next year is the first year we introduce the one-to-one devices to our preps, but they've always had a pool to, a share pool, but next year they will have their own. So we are one-to-one Chromebooks from prep through to 6, and we were early adopters of the Chromebook. We pretty much bought a class set as soon as Google announced Chromebooks were being provided to schools, or giving access to schools. So I'm going to say it's been about 8 years, but correct me if I'm wrong. Does that sound about right? That's how long Chromebooks have been around for. And so we generally release them, and every 3 years we get new devices. So next year we are going one-to-one with the Acer Spin, which we're very excited about. So not only do children get access to a laptop, but they also have that tablet accessibility with a stylus. And we know that touch screen is all they're digital natives, particularly the junior children. So that will be happening next year. In terms of how we use our Chromebooks, there's nothing we haven't, there's nothing we found that we really can't do. So we use Chromebooks across the curriculum, across the school, in all subject areas. And we're a G Suite school, so we use the entire G Suite platform, from Drive to Docs to Slides to Classroom, from juniors through to senior school. We find that we can use it to help students, with learning disabilities, speech delays, hearing impairments, visual, children who suffer with dyslexia. So there's lots of extensions and apps that we've found to assist children in reading on a screen. Particularly, there's an app, an extension, I don't remember the name of it, but it allows you to change the color overlay of the screen for students who have, say, Irlen syndrome, which is a form of dyslexia. So we use it in that way, all the way through to having children develop apps, app prototypes in our senior school. So we had some students, we had like a kind of a Shark Tank sort of model where our students designed apps in teams, and they built them all on their Chromebooks. They built the prototypes on their Chromebooks, and they created presentations on their Chromebooks. They had design briefs on their Chromebooks. They did all the graphic design stuff on their Chromebooks. So we've kind of used them across the board to help children who are, like I said, who are maybe struggling in a certain area, to, giving children the opportunity to be, designers and app creators and pitch to a panel of judges. We also use it as our workbooks, in particular subjects. We use it for assessments. So there's nothing really we don't use the Chromebook for. It doesn't replace learning. I know that, there are lots of parents who get worried about, there's still parents who worry that technology has replaced, handwriting. So it definitely doesn't, it's used as a tool. So it's not something that we only use, but when we do use it as a tool, it is a very powerful and beneficial one. And we look so forward next year to being able to use it as a tablet as well, particularly with those junior students. So I don't know if there's any particular questions that people want to ask in terms of how we use them, but we just find that, it just comes naturally to the students. The teachers love how easy they are to access in terms of logging in. And regardless of whether a child has their Chromebook or not, no matter whose Chromebook they're logging into, their screen's going to look the same, their folders are going to look the same. So they've just been a fabulous device. We couldn't imagine, I guess, teaching without our Chromebooks now, because we do rely heavily on them.
Thanks, Sonia. And I think it's such an interesting, Sonia and I were chatting before about a school contacted them this last week and sort of said, oh, we've been thinking about Chromebooks. We know you're using them, but we know we can't do blah-de-blah and we can't do X, Y, Z on a Chromebook. And I think, there's a lot of that misconception. And I know Chris is going to share some specific examples about that shortly. But Sonia, if there's one thing that, what do you, I guess the feedback from your teachers from different year levels, is there, is it pretty much across the board, whether we're talking like juniors, middle, senior kids, that the teachers all have that same sort of sentiment, or is there things that they particularly love at particular year levels about the devices?
To be honest, our teachers probably don't know any different, considering we've always used Chromebooks since. So I've been here for 10 years now. So we started adopting the G Suite platform. And then from there, as soon as Chromebooks came about, we just started to use them. So it's just natural to us. We've always had, it's kind of like something we've always had now, and we're so used to it. So there's nothing that they found that they kind of can't do on it, because they're just used to working out a way to be able to do something that they may not have known. So if there's an app they need or an extension they need, they'll go and find it, or they'll find a web app that does the same thing. The only thing I might say is obviously the juniors, you know, having them type and giving them time to learn their username and password, that could be a little bit of a struggle. But once they practice and learn how to log in, it's not a problem anymore. And now that it will have next year the access, the option of being a tablet, that's just a huge bonus, I guess. I didn't know about the PIN number thing, so I'm going to introduce the PIN number and possibly have all the juniors logging in with that, because the teachers will love it even more. But that would be the only thing I'd say that they probably find the trickiest, getting them to log in, remember passwords, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I know the PIN number one's a great one, and I think it's one of those like lesser known nuggets of goodness that's why we have people like Rich around, because he shares all of those with us. We had a question from Tony, who I actually had a chat to before the start of this, around if someone's new to the school, and you know, because obviously you do get new staff, even at a great school like yours where people want to stay. How do they find the transition to Chromebooks if they have been teaching in a school that's had all a different device previously and they haven't really had any exposure to them?
Our teachers personally don't use a Chromebook. The students use a Chromebook. But we are looking into getting our teachers on the devices as well once our lease agreements are up. But to be honest, we particularly have graduates as new staff come on board, and having graduates adopt Chromebooks really haven't been an issue, because they're generally used to using the G Suite for Education platform at university or what have you. But to be honest, we haven't really had anyone be reluctant to use it or have an issue in terms of being able to access anything on there, because they get a Gmail account as soon as they join the team. It just kind of comes a natural sort of thing. So the teachers haven't had any problem with it. I think they're just more excited when they come to know that every kid has one, to be honest.
Yeah, it's that access to information. I think also, though, Sonia, I think that's testament to you and the rest of the leadership team at Sir Thomas More, because I think, I was in my previous life, was lucky enough to get to do some work out at the school as well. And, you guys have done such a great job of bringing people along on that journey. And I think that's really important if you are transitioning between platforms, is, that change management concept with staff, because change is scary for people. The unknown is a little bit unnerving. So how do we support them with professional learning? How do we empower them? How do we make sure that they feel resourced and valued, and the fact that they are just acknowledging that this is a learning journey. It may take a little while to feel 100% at home with it, and that's totally fine, because every time we take on a new task, it's new.
Never the actual device that they're concerned about. If anything, it's if they haven't used the G Suite platform and they're not sure or familiar with that. So we haven't had anyone really say or be reluctant to use the actual Chromebook, because I guess they look at it like a laptop or, just a different device that they can access things on. It's more if they're not familiar with G Suite and they might be a little bit, worried or nervous or anxious about that. But then we just have professional development in that area. But in terms of the device itself, I can't really say we've had much sort of setback from anybody.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then we had another question from Lee around, do you have an approach to designing activities in terms of redefining learning rather than substitution, so paper-based? So everybody's on the call is probably familiar with the SAMR model, which I'm assuming is Lee's basically talking about there. How have you gone about that? So rather than, I know my school, when we went one-to-one a long, long time ago, it was very much like, here we used to read our paper book and now we have a book on here. And so basically the book went from costing $5 to $500. How have you gone as a school around approaching, ensuring that we're actually thinking about designing learning that wasn't possible without that access to technology?
So before obviously during remote learning, that had to just G Suite, I guess, replaced all of that stuff because we were in that situation. But before that, I guess that comes from the culture of the school, not just the platforms or devices that you're using. So we plan in teams. Our teachers meet weekly with a leader. And I guess the way that we plan has always been, we try and plan from, with a lens of innovation. We try and look at innovative ways we can teach, and we look through a design lens. So we don't really use the tool or the Chromebook or the platform to replace pen and paper. We use that where it's needed, but rather we look for tools we can use to enhance learning. So, for example, I guess I'll go back to the the time when we had students designing apps, we tried to jump on, we jump online and look for apps that are going to give children those experiences. So we try and find ways to provide experiences and innovate rather than just replace, general writing or typing or anything like that. So I guess we just give a lot of freedom to teachers and students as well in terms of how they might create something or how they might teach something. And we don't lock anything down. We don't lock the Chrome Web Store down. We don't lock extensions down. It's a free to all sort of platform. And if they need something, they just go and find it. So I think that's more of a cultural sort of thing in terms of maybe how the school plans or plans for learning. So we try not to just replace books, but use the tool and make sure we really do access what's available, or go and look for stuff that's available that we know that's going to enhance learning. I don't know if that's answered your question. I hope so, but
no, I think, and Sonia, you're actually doing a perfect segue into what Chris is going to talk about next, but we're actually talking about the doing and the verbs in the learning. We're not talking about, creating something with a specific app. We're talking about the skill behind why we would use that app for creating and so on. I am conscious of your time, Sonia. I could just talk to you all afternoon. Sonia and I caught up for 5 minutes, which went for about, half an hour before. So is there any other questions for Sonia before we sort of jump in, and Chris is going to share some specifics? And I'm 100% knowing your school, Sonia. I know that Chris is going to share some examples of stuff that you guys already do as well. So some really concrete examples. But are there any other questions for Sonia before we let her go?
Feel free to email, or I'm sure Kimberly can. I'll throw my email address in there, so if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer at a later stage.
Thank you, Sonia. That's a really generous offer as well.
I'll pop it in there.
Okay, sufficient teacher wait time. And while Sonia was talking, there was a question from Anderson about the PIN login and the fingerprint login. And obviously fingerprint is biometric data. And so Rich has responded and said it's only stored locally. But obviously when it comes to, personal identifying information, it's always good to get parents and guardians permission first. And if you're unsure about that, then have a conversation with the jurisdiction through which your particular school reports up to, whether it's a Department of Education, a Catholic diocese, etc. They should be able to guide you around that specific use as well. All right. Thank you so much, Sonia. Always a pleasure.
We'll see you soon.
Thanks. All right, and I'm going to hand over to Chris Betcher now. He's going to talk about some specific examples around creativity on Chromebooks.
Thank you, Kimberly. Thanks everyone. That was awesome. I want to come to your school. So I used to be an art teacher at one point in time, and so my thing was all about dealing with, the idea of creativity, the idea of kids making stuff all the time, and I kind of drifted out of art teaching into design and technology and then computing. So I've always been working in schools around this idea of kids doing stuff, making stuff. And so like when teachers say to me things like, oh, how do you assess? You can't really assess creativity, can you? It's like, yeah, art teachers do that all the time. Like English teachers do that all the time. Like we all do that all the time. So creativity is actually a really important part of all the stuff we do in schools. Rich, I don't know if I can control from my end, so I might get you to go to the next slide, please. So like we've already talked about the fact that there are already a bunch of tools inside G Suite that do a whole bunch of that core productivity stuff. You've got doc sheets, slides for your word processing, your spreadsheets and your presentations. You've got Jamboard, which is like a collaborative whiteboard that you can brainstorm on. You've got all these other great tools, forms and Google Sites and Meet and email and all the rest of it. So all the basic productivity stuff is covered. But when my school, and again, I was a bit like Sonia, my school went Google fairly early. I think the school I was teaching at would now probably be a G Suite school for close to 10 years, I would say. And so I guess we were fairly early adopters there, and we went Chromebooks fairly soon as well. And as we made this transition from the conventional Microsoft land that everybody lived in at the time into this Google world, and we started to realize, oh, we used to use Word, now we use Docs. We used to use Excel, now we use Sheets. This is a pretty easy transition. It's actually not that big a deal. And then we got Chromebooks, which actually meant that we only had access to these web apps. We couldn't really, take the escape hatch out sometimes and jump out to an app that wasn't cloud-based and, do it on a Windows machine because we didn't have those. So I started to look really carefully because I realized there was a whole bunch of great productivity tools in G Suite that covered the basics. But what happens when you want to go beyond the basics? What then? And I started to dig around a lot, and there's actually a lot of great solutions that work in a browser that are great substitutes for a lot of the things that teachers need to do anyway. Can we go next slide, Rich? And just tap one more time, please. Thank you. And look, the basic thing is that learning is about doing things. And that's such a core idea that, it's about the verbs, not the nouns. It's about the things kids do, not the tools they use to do it with. And a classic example of this came when our school went, we made the transition from Microsoft land to Google land, if you like. And there were teachers who actually had written into their teaching programs, in year 4, students will produce a PowerPoint presentation about blah, blah, blah. And these teachers were freaking out because it was like, we don't have PowerPoint anymore. How are we going to do the task? And completely missing the point that it's not about the tool, it's about the things that you do. And, we got people in this call from all over Australia and different parts of the world even. And I'm not intimately familiar with every curriculum around the world, but I guarantee you if I went into any curriculum from anywhere at random, it would be full of words like this: create, present, compare, evaluate, design, outline, justify, publish, describe. These are the things that kids do. These are the verbs of education. And so when it says like a student should, present, well, man, there's a ton of tools they could present with. How do you outline something? How do you persuade an audience? Like, there's not just one tool that does any of this. And I think as we move from, one platform to another platform, be it hardware or software, the really important thing to keep in the back of your mind is like, it shouldn't matter what the device is. It shouldn't matter what the platform is, because we're not teaching the platform, we're teaching thinking skills. That's what we're about. So just as a preface, I just wanted to now take you through, next slide, please. Some of the alternatives that you can use, or some of the great tools you can use that work perfectly well on a Chromebook in order to do some of this creative work that kids do. And so I'm just going to run through some of them, and then I'm just going to take a few minutes at the end of my bit to maybe do a little quick live demo of something, just to give you an idea about how this would work. So like Google Earth, for example, most of you are familiar with the idea of Google Earth. But a lot of people haven't looked at it recently, and you remember when it used to have to be installed on your computer. Now it runs in the browser. It's a beautiful interactive model of our planet that runs entirely inside the browser. And you can do amazing things in there. There's a whole bunch of storytelling tools now inside Google Earth that kids can use inside the classroom and make presentations about the world. Toontastic. Now, by the way, you notice underneath each of these logos here, I've put a tiny little Chrome and Android logo. That's just to indicate for you which of these tools runs on which platform, because you can run Android applications on a Chromebook. And so, suddenly everything in the Play Store now opens up to you in terms of what's available. So anything you can kind of do on your phone, you could potentially do on your Chromebook. Okay, now some of these apps do, I will preface it by saying some work better than others on the large screen of a Chromebook. And I'm just telling you about the ones that do work really well. So for example, Google Earth, both the web and also on Android. Toontastic is this amazing comic thing where you basically drag animated puppets around the screen, hit the record button and speak, and the puppet will move its mouth, and you can drag it around the screen, and you can tell these amazing stories using just your Chromebook. Blogger, great way to tell stories, document learning experience, create journals. Stop Motion Studio is an Android app that runs on a Chromebook where you can create stop motion videos. So you can, create the, red versus blue, so claymation type stuff, or just animate objects moving around the room. All possible. Next slide, please, Rich. Canva is one of these free tools that I used to work a lot in the Adobe world, so Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, all that kind of stuff. I still love those tools, they're great. But honestly, for schools, a lot of that is really overkill. Like if I wanted my kids to produce a poster, I can spend 8 weeks teaching them how to use InDesign and then let them make a poster, or I can just go to Canva and make a poster. Right? Why would I not do that? The goal is to make the poster, to tell a story, to persuade an audience, or to communicate. The goal is not necessarily to learn how to use a complex piece of software. So Canva, and by the way, Canva is free for schools now. So if you if you're an EDU organization, you can apply to Canva and they will give you all their services for free. It's awesome. Cami is a great tool for annotating and manipulating PDF files. So kids who want to get, a page of notes or, a document of some sort and get their pen and annotate over it. Because of course, a lot of Chromebooks now come with a stylus that you can write and draw and annotate over the top of. Cami is a great tool for that. Lucid Press is an alternative for desktop publishing. That's how I started in computing. The way I fell in love with computing many, many years ago was through desktop publishing. When I saw Lucid Press, I was blown away by what can be done in just a browser. It can import INDD files, InDesign files. It can export those files. And the beautiful thing about Lucid Press, as opposed to a more conventional desktop publisher, is that it actually simultaneously creates for print and the web at the same time. So you don't have to make your print version and go, oh, now I've got to make a web version of this. It does it all in one hit. If you have a 3D printer and you want to design objects to be 3D printed, Tinkercad runs on a Chromebook just in the browser and lets you do that design and print process straight to the 3D printer. Next slide, please, Rich. One of the staples that every school should have, regardless of which platform you're using, is probably Screencastify. It's a Chrome extension that simply runs inside your web browser and lets you record and edit screencasts. If you can record what's happening on your screen and turn it into a quick and easy video, you can explain concepts. You can, ideate ideas on a screen. You can brainstorm. You can just demonstrate how to solve a maths problem. If you can record your screen, a whole lot of things open up. And you want to talk about moving up into the R of the SAMA model. Being able to record your screen is a huge step in that direction. Pixlr Editor, people often say, what about Photoshop? Is there an alternative to Photoshop? I got to be honest with you, there really isn't. Photoshop's a 35-year-old piece of software that is incredibly complex. And that said, most people don't use most of the features inside something like Photoshop. They just want to get in and make a few adjustments to a photo or do a bit of design work. Pixlr Editor is a version of a Photoshop-like tool that operates purely in a browser. So, it's a great alternative. Squid, it's an Android app. Again, lets you use a stylus to take notes, draw, sketch. Infinite Painter, very sophisticated painting and drawing tool that lets you paint, sketch, draw. Digital tools. It's got a whole bunch of tools and brushes and art tools. It's an Android app running on Chrome OS. Works beautifully. Next slide. And then there's final ones here I just want to talk about. Explain Everything. Explain Everything started as an iPad app. It was, I've heard people say that if you have iPads and you could only ever choose one app only, Explain Everything would probably be it. Well, Explain Everything now runs in Android, which means it runs on Chrome OS, so you can run it on your Chromebook. Again, it's just like the iOS version. It runs exactly the same. So, I see tools. I see some schools that they want the best of the tablet world. They want the best of the laptop world. And the thing is, these days, modern Chromebooks now, many of them will flip over and turn themselves into a tablet. And so you get your stylus and you're using it. So you actually get the best of both a tablet with a stylus and also flip it back over. And now you've got a regular laptop style form factor with a keyboard. And a lot of people love having a keyboard. Book Creator, again, it was an iOS app. It's morphed its way now into being a web-based tool that runs just in the browser, does all the same stuff that the app used to do. And these final two just blow me away. I don't know if you remember the first time you ever saw Google Maps, because Google Maps came along at a time many, many years ago when the web was this static thing. You loaded a web page and there was some text and whatnot on it. And all of a sudden Google Maps came along and there was these maps and you could click them and drag them and move them and stretch them. And people were going, this is happening inside a web browser. I can't believe this. Well, Soundtrap, if you've ever used a tool like, say, GarageBand on a Mac, Soundtrap is a similar kind of experience to GarageBand, except it's running in the browser. Because it's running in the browser, you can collaborate together. So you can start creating a music track or a podcast, right? I understand music Making music in a classroom, if you're not a music teacher, probably seems like a moot point. But many, many subjects could make use of creating podcasts. And you can do that really easily in Soundtrap collaboratively. So kids can do group projects working together on the same project from different machines. And the final one I just want to talk about is WeVideo. For me, the deal breaker, in the early days of Chromebooks, because you couldn't edit video on a Chromebook, was not being able to edit video on a Chromebook, right? I come from a art teaching background, making film, making video, that was kind of my thing. And so, I found it very hard to take Chromebooks seriously until I could do that. WeVideo is a web-based, non-linear video editor that is, it's probably not Premiere Pro or Final Cut, right? It won't do all that real heavy end stuff, but let's face it, most people in schools don't use all of those features anyway. If most schools could get away with something like iMovie or Windows Movie Maker, they can probably do most of the stuff they ever want to make videos about. WeVideo exceeds probably both of those tools, but is not high-end enough to be called a professional video editing tool, but it does most things. I don't know how we're going for time. If we have time, Kimberly, I can do a very quick demo of WeVideo.
We have approximately 2 minutes. But we're also supposed to just mention a bit about assessments, so maybe we won't do a live demo of WeVideo, Chris. No. But what I was going to add on your WeVideo, like I was going to yes and your WeVideo comment with my favorite new feature in WeVideo is the ability to do the full synchronous editing across collaboratively. So that part for me was like, wow, we just went from making like I have to shoot my video, you have to shoot your video, we live in separate worlds, to WeVideo has a that collaborative library where I can upload footage, we can be collaborating on it, but now we can actually real time edit a video from wherever we are using our Chromebooks. Is phenomenal because it takes it from being about the video, once again, Chris, to being about the learning, the process of collaboration, all of those things as well.
Yeah, so I think WeVideo has always been able to have like a shared bin, so be able to have the film clips you're working with inside a shared resource that multiple kids can go and reach in and out of. If you've done filmmaking in schools, often the hardest part is silly things like, how do I get the footage from my camera onto the computer? And once I get it on there, what if that kid over there has got footage that I want to use? All of those problems go away in a collaborative environment. But as Kimberly said, about 2 weeks ago, WeVideo introduced a new feature where you can not only share collaborative resources to edit, but you can literally go in and edit on the same timeline together. So as people are clicking in and shortening a clip or dropping in a transition or adding a title or whatever, you're actually seeing that happen in real time on your computer in much the same way that most of you probably realize you can do with a Google Doc.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Moving into a brave new world of media creation thanks to the web. And as the power of Chromebooks gets better and cheaper, and the power of what you can do in the web, the technology that powers things like Chrome gets better and better, I'm 100% convinced that this is the future of modern computing, being able to do all this stuff inside a browser.
Yeah. So, Chris, Lee just asked about the bandwidth. Oh, Rich, I love the fact that I didn't even get to ask the question, and Brent, both of you have answered it. So both Rich and Brent have just dropped in the answer. So Lee just asked about bandwidth with WeVideo. Obviously, we are talking all completely online stuff. Brent and Rich are both.
I will tell you just with the bandwidth thing, with conventional video editing, usually getting your footage from the camera to the computer takes a little bit of time because you've got to download it onto the machine and so on, but it doesn't take too long. But when you get to the end with a conventional editing tool, the rendering process is often the slowest part. And if you're doing a really big edit, it can take a long time to do that final render. In WeVideo, it tends to be the reverse. The time-consuming bit tends to be getting your footage into the system because you've obviously got to upload it. And it doesn't take a long time. I don't know, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that for a couple of high-def videos. It doesn't take a long time, not as long as you would expect. But where you really win is on the other end when you do the render at the end, because the rendering is not taking place on your low-powered Chromebook. It's taking place on a server farm up in the cloud, and you've actually got multiple powerful CPUs dealing with the render. So it happens very quickly. And not only that, but you can render out to multiple platforms at a time. So you can do a local MP4 version while you're also rendering direct to YouTube, while you're also saving a copy to Drive, and so on. So it's a little bit swings and roundabouts. Yes, some things take longer, but other things are much quicker.
Yeah, and so Lee was just clarifying that, like, if you have multiple machines doing it once. Look, I think one of the biggest things in Australia is if we could get our internet service providers to stop throttling our upload speed. Can we all revolt against that, like collectively? Can I start a movement? Not probably supposed to try and start movements. I think everyone's life would be better. But look, we see classrooms full of kids use this all the time. So I mean, I tend to find that schools have the best internet in the country in many places. So yeah, we can go into more specifics. Lee, feel free to contact us. Chris is probably the expert on all things WeVideo. I am conscious that we are over time. So Chris, Rich, could you jump to the Chromebook App Hub page quickly? So we did just want to flag this before we just talk about a couple of final things, that if you haven't checked out the Chromebook App Hub, this is a really great resource. And I think, you know, as Chris was sort of touching on, like his top list, if there's specific things that you want to do, and we often get as a team questions like, but what can I use, you know, with grade 4s for coding on a Chromebook? You can literally go to the Chromebook Web Hub, Chromebook App Hub, and actually filter for by category, by age group. You can search on there for specific things that you might want to do, and it'll actually bring up all of the apps and some actual ideas. And the ideas have been written by teachers for teachers. So like, how do I actually use this app in a meaningful way in my classroom?
And you know, I mentioned before that not all apps are equal. Some work better than others, especially on the Android side. Everything that comes into the Chromebook App Hub has been really thoroughly vetted for the fact that it does work really well, and also things like privacy and security assessments, you know, who the publisher of the app is, all that information is stored in there as well. So, you know, if you're an IT person, all the things you need to know are right there for every app. If you're a teacher, there's a whole bunch of teaching ideas for every app as well that come with like lesson plans and suggestions and things you can do with them. So it is a terrific resource.
Yeah, and if you are the person that's doing the privacy impact assessments at your school, you can get a lot of the data you need from the Chromebook App Hub as well. Okay, so in terms of all of these amazing things that happen, Rich, do you want to quickly, we were going to talk a little bit about assessment, but really what I was going to talk to in assessment point of view from Chromebooks is, rather than going into G Suite assessment, which is a whole webinar in itself, was just talk about the concept that we have some really cool things that you can do to administer assessments in a controlled way through Chromebooks. So they're really quite technical. So Rich, if you want to talk about managing the apps and then jump into, sorry, I know I'm making you jump through, and then just jump into that concept that we can also manage the way assessments run through a Chromebook, just to finish off. And if you need to drop off, we completely understand. We obviously are recording, so we'll have just a couple final minutes around making all of this seamlessly, magically happen in the background. Rich.
Thanks, Kimberly. So again, as an administrator, you want to be able to provide the best collection of apps to your students or to your teachers. And the best way to do that is to make them magically appear on the device, push them down, or make them available for the students to actually select. So you can do that through the Google Admin Console. Now, I do want to clarify that all the apps that Chris has shown you today they are either Chrome applications or they are Android applications, but we actually have two other types of applications that are available. So we have what we call PWA, Progressive Web Apps, which is a reasonably new terminology, but it basically means applications that go across multiple operating systems, whether that's iOS, Android, you name it. And then we also have Linux apps. So for those that need to do more development work or they need a Linux environment to do so, they're available as well. Now, all of these apps, except for the Linux apps, are able to be pushed down to each of your devices at a school level. So it means that you have the console open, you select your OU or your organizational unit, and then you can select on options to allow install or force install, and you can pin to the taskbar as well. So very quickly, three-step process. You need to enable the Android store if you're using Android apps, but every other app that you have on there, you select it, select the OU, and install it. It's very, very simple, very, very easy. Okay. Let's quickly talk about secure assessments. So one great thing that you can do with Chromebooks is you can push down what we call single app kiosks. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, that's great. What does that mean for me? What it does mean is that if you have any online testing applications, such as the NAPLAN application, you can push this automatically to the Chromebook straight away before a student even logs into the device. So even from the login screen, you can have it ready to go, click one button and you're into the NAPLAN application. And you can do this across hundreds of other applications as well, if you want to. So it's very simple. Jump into the admin console again, select your OU, and you can go into your Chrome Web Store, select the NAPLAN app or any other app, and apply it directly to those devices, and they're ready to go as soon as you boot. I might end it there and just see if we have any more questions, and then Kimberly can close off.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I think that's really awesome. And I asked Rich to include that URL blocking because when we were talking about assessment, the couple of schools have always asked, like, well, but I don't want my kids to be able to go to this particular website during an assessment. And you can actually control that sort of things for particular users, etc., for sessions and stuff as well. So there is a whole another thing that we could talk about for another 3 hours. We are coming back next week, though, to talk about some more stuff around Chromebooks. We were specifically going to have a focus next week on making the switch to Chromebooks. So there are some people who have asked questions this afternoon around, if they have users who are used to a different platform, what is it like to transition, etc. Next week's session is very much specifically for you, but as you can tell, we're also really open to any questions as well. So feel free to share the registration link for next week. In the interim, once again, I just want to thank everybody very much for giving up their time to spend with us this afternoon. We do have some contact details on the screen. So if you are in those regions, if you're not in a region that's listed on the screen, feel free to email me and I can direct you to either, if I can't help you, someone else, I will direct you to someone else that can. Rich gets a lot of directed emails from me, which he loves. So feel free to reach out and we will definitely help you if we can. We just wanted to give you a bit of a taste of some of the possibilities on Chromebooks. They are really endless, and we honestly, I think all of us are working where we are working right now because we have seen the capabilities and the potential with Chromebooks to really do some meaningful learning, and the limitations I think that existed when Sonia talked about first getting Chromebooks 7-8 years ago. They don't exist anymore. And so we're just really trying to provide some information. So if there's anything else we can do, please do reach out. Happy to help. The recording will be attached to the calendar invitation for this afternoon session. So the recording and the notes, which will be in a Google Doc. So please feel free to share with anyone else that would benefit from hearing this as well. And I will stop the recording, but we will stay on for another few minutes. If anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat, but I am going to turn off the recording now. So if you're watching us in repeat, thanks for joining us.